The envelope was plain. No insignia, no postmark. Just cream-white paper, slightly weathered, with a sharp crease down the middle like it had been folded and unfolded too many times. It sat on the Capitol steps in the early dawn mist, unnoticed by most, until a janitor picked it up and handed it to security. Within the hour, it was on Jasmine Crockett's desk. She didn't open it at first. She stared at it for a full minute, her fingers hovering above the corner like it might burn. Her breath caught when she finally peeled the flap open and pulled the document free. Congressional seal, Oversight Committee. Her name bold, official, and terrifying. A subpoena. Her eyes scanned the lines. A formal request. No, a directive. To chair a special oversight hearing investigating abuse of executive authority to suppress constitutionally protected speech and manipulation of federal legal proceedings for personal or political gain. The accused, the 45th President of the United States. She sat back slowly, pressing her thumb against her lip. Jasmine had been here before. The fights, the speeches, the hearings where power twisted language into performance. But this was different. This wasn't a bill. This was a battle plan. She picked up the red file clipped beneath the subpoena. Sealed intelligence summary. 3 words that make even the seasoned lose sleep. The seal cracked with a reluctant click. Inside were surveillance transcripts, redacted names, and, in bold black ink at the top of the first page, Operation Backpage, lines of text flashed past her eyes, secret directives to label left-leaning influencers as foreign threats, disinformation tags planted on critics' accounts, an entire algorithmic framework designed to choke voices like hers, voices like those of journalists, advocates, organizers, she whispered to herself, almost inaudibly. They really did it. Outside her office, the hallway remained quiet, a stark contrast to what boiled beneath the marble floors of the Capitol across town. In ADC high-rise, wrapped in reflective glass, Trump's defense team was already mocking the subpoena. William Drexler, lead counsel, slick, silver-haired, and bred for televised outrage, leaned back in his leather chair. They're letting a blogger run a trial now? He laughed, sipping espresso. This is theater. We'll bury her in precedent and watch her drown in it. Jasmine closed the folder, her expression unreadable. She walked to the window, watching the rain kiss the concrete. Somewhere beneath the weight of history and headlines, she made a quiet decision. If they thought she would break under pressure, they'd underestimated the woman they just subpoenaed. The hearing chamber buzzed with a muted electricity, reporters whispered from behind their screens, staffers shuffled papers with nervous precision, and security guards stood stone-faced along the walls. The committee room had been polished to ceremonial perfection, but the tension in the air made the floor feel like it might crack beneath the weight of what was about to unfold. Jasmine Crockett stepped through the side entrance, flanked by 2 junior aides. She wore navy, strong, sharp, unflinching, and carried no notes, only a slim, black binder pressed to her chest. As she crossed the floor, a few heads turned. Some leaned toward each other in disbelief. Is she really leading this? Others nodded with quiet approval. A few smirked, already writing her off. She took her seat at the center of the committee table, directly facing the witness chair and the long line of defense counsel that had assembled. Microphones were tested. Cameras blinked red. A gavel struck wood. The Oversight Subcommittee on Executive Accountability was now in session. Representative Crockett, said the chairman, a weary centrist from Oregon with a voice like rusted steel, you may proceed. Jasmine cleared her throat but didn't speak immediately. Instead, she let the silence expand, grow uncomfortable, fill the marble chamber with a kind of moral static. Then, softly but clearly, the purpose of this inquiry is not retaliation. It is revelation. Her voice was steady, controlled. It is our constitutional responsibility to investigate credible claims that the previous administration used the machinery of government to suppress dissent, alter digital visibility of lawful criticism, and manipulate legal outcomes through unofficial backchannels. A few committee members shifted in their seats. Jasmine continued, I was not chosen to lead this hearing because I'm the loudest voice in the room. I'm here because I was one of the voices targeted. A low murmur spread across the chamber. Like wind over glass, that wasn't in her opening statement. That was personal. That was unexpected. At the opposite table, William Drexler raised an eyebrow, amused. When given his turn, he leaned forward into his mic, all calm venom and well-rehearsed. Charm, what we have here, he began, is a trial not of facts but of feelings. My client is not on trial. His legacy is... He gestured toward Jasmine, and while I commend Representative Crockett's enthusiasm, this committee is not a therapy session for wounded reputations. A few chuckles broke out among the right-wing press. Jasmine didn't respond immediately. She simply closed her binder. She looked Drexler dead in the eye and replied, "This isn't about reputation. It's about power." That stopped the room. For a brief moment, even the ceiling lights seemed to hum a little louder. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. The cameras zoomed in. Outside the chamber, clips of that moment were already making their rounds. It's about power. The words echoed online in group chats, in green rooms of late-night shows, and in the anxious hearts of every bureaucrat with something to hide. And in that silent space between Drexler's smug smile and Jasmine's quiet defiance, something fundamental shifted. This was no longer a hearing. It was a reckoning. It was after midnight when Jasmine returned to her apartment, the buzz of cameras still echoing faintly in her ears. The city outside her window blinked with distant lights, but the Capitol dome, always visible, now felt like it was watching her. She sat on the edge of her bed, binder in hand, flipping through pages like a surgeon reviewing x-rays before a high-risk operation, names blurred into code words, directives into euphemisms. And then, buried between legal memos and time-stamped surveillance logs, she saw it. Her name, subject, Crockett Jasmine A. The line was cold, clinical, terrifying in its casual cruelty. Below it, a short summary, flagged for digital suppression, categorized as destabilizing influence. Platform reached to be curtailed under Phase 3 of Operation Backpage Secondary. Action, smear via cyber identity protocol if visibility persists. She froze. The words weren't just about her. They targeted her, her platform, her writing, her voice. This wasn't a bureaucratic slip-up. This was surgical silencing. Her blogger, the one she'd started during law school to give voice to marginalized communities, had always received pushback. But this explained the sudden shadow bans, the quiet disappearance of traffic, the strange uptick in trolls quoting government code at her in the comments. And then a memory surfaced. One she'd pushed down, one she hadn't let herself. Revisit in 2 years. KYLA. Jasmine single quotes S friend, fellow activist. Razor sharp, unfiltered, brilliant. In 2021, Keela had posted a long-form investigation into federal misuse of online platforms. She'd named the connections, called out the silence of Silicon Valley. 3 weeks later, Kayla was gone. Suicide, they said, a private struggle. No note. No explanation. Until now, there, tucked in the sealed file, was an unredacted snippet of intercepted correspondence. A message flagged from Kayla's email days before her death. It read, "They're not just silencing us. They're rewriting who we are. If anything happens to me, tell Jasmine she was right." Jasmine's throat tightened. For a long time she sat in silence, her hand over her mouth, eyes fixed on that single, trembling line of text. The weight of it wasn't political anymore. It was personal. An unbearable. In the courtroom, she had held her ground. She had spoken with clarity, poise. But here, in the dark, the grief came uninvited. She whispered into the stillness, "I'm so sorry, Kyla." Across town, Drexler was on the phone, laughing with a producer from a conservative network. "This whole thing's about a ghost and a blog." "Trust me, the public doesn't care about either." He had no idea what was coming because Jasmine Crockett wasn't fighting to win a headline. She was fighting to avenge a voice that had been stolen, and when the time came, she would speak. Not for herself, but for every person who had been erased without a sound. The courtroom was more crowded than ever. Journalists pressed against the glass at the back. Law students skipped class to sit in silence on the floor. Every seat was filled, not with curiosity, but tension. Something in the air felt so unbustibly. William Drexler entered like a man, staging a performance. His tailored suit shimmered slightly beneath the lights. He adjusted his cufflinks slowly as he approached the bench and placed a single, thick folder before the judge. "Motion to dismiss," he announced, loud enough for the back row to hear. The judge, Gerald R. Stanton, looked up over his glasses. He was in his late 60s, measured, unreadable, carved from the same stone as the old American legal order. "On what grounds?" Stanton asked, already wary. Drexler smiled like a man who knew the script and was only here to play his part. "Executive privilege, Your Honor." And the precedent of Fitzgerald v. Nixon confirms that former presidents are immune from civil proceedings related to acts within the outer perimeter of their official duties. He paused for dramatic effect. Suppression of digital content, alleged or real, would fall under national security considerations, which, as this court knows, remains sacred ground regardless of political climate. Whispers filled the chamber. Jasmine didn't move. Drexler went on, striding slowly like he owned the space. "This is not an investigation. It's an inquisition led by someone with a blog and a microphone." Jasmine raised her head. He continued, "My client's actions, if they occurred, which we do not concede, were taken in the interest of preserving national order, not punishing dissent. And the idea that a single congressional voice can rewrite the balance of power is not just dangerous. It's laughable." He turned toward Jasmine with the smile of a man who mistook calm for weakness. She stood slowly. "No notes?" "Just her, Your Honor," Jasmine said. "We do not dispute the reality of national security needs. What we dispute is the fiction that national security can be used as a mask for silencing truth." Her voice rose, not in volume, but in precision. "The Constitution does not offer immunity from conscience. No clause protects the powerful from accountability when their actions erode the foundation of public trust." Drexler opened his mouth to object, but she cut through with clarity. "If truth is treason, then this court is already lost." Silence. Even Stanton blinked. Drexler sat down, the weight of that sentence pressing hard against the smirk he couldn't quite hold. Judge Stanton tapped his gavel once, slowly, then twice. "Motion to dismiss is denied. Proceedings will continue." It wasn't just a procedural victory. It was a warning to every corner of power that had grown too comfortable with impunity. Jasmine didn't look at Drexler as she returned to her seat. She looked at the American flag hanging above the judge's bench and whispered, just loud enough to herself, "This is what it's for." The following morning, the line to enter the courtroom stretched around the building. Security doubled. Journalists whispered theories. Pundits speculated breathlessly on air. What could she have next? Jasmine didn't speak to reporters. She entered silently, binder in hand. Eyes forward, Judge Stanton called the room to order. "You may proceed, Representative." Jasmine stepped forward and placed a black flash drive on the evidence table. Her voice was steady but colder than before, the kind of calm that comes after you've stopped caring whether the storm hears you scream. "Your Honor," she said, "what I'm about to play was obtained through a sealed congressional intelligence request. It has been authenticated." She nodded toward the technician in the corner. The lights dimmed slightly as speakers crackled to life. At first, just static. Then a male voice, gruff, impatient, unmistakable. "We need to scrub the Crockett channel. She's stirring up sentiment. Algorithms not catching her fast enough." Another voice chimed in, clearer. "We'll label her content high volatility. Risk-coded. That'll drop her visibility 80% overnight." "Good. Get it done. She's not just talking, she's organizing." Silence. Then the first voice again. "She's a social virus. And we need her erased before the weekend." The audio clicked off. Gasps. Audible, raw, involuntary, even seasoned. Press veterans looked around in disbelief. The courtroom buzzed with disbelief. Jasmine stood still. Drexler sprang to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor, this is inadmissible." "We don't know who's speaking. Actually, we do," Jasmine interrupted, her voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. Voice print analysis confirms the lead speaker is former Deputy Chief of Staff Mark Halvorsen. And the timestamp places the recording 6 days before my content disappeared from every major search engine. Drexler's face flushed red. Objection, this is deeply prejudicial and it's evidence. Judge Stanton interrupted, voice firm. And it will be entered into the record. Drexler sat down, seething. Jasmine turned to the court. Let me be clear. This is not about one blog, one voice. This was a directive to silence dissent through digital warfare, not with tanks, but with code. She paused. And the worst part? They said it like it was routine, like it was nothing. Cameras zoomed in. They called me a virus. But viruses don't write the Constitution. People do. In the gallery, someone clapped once before being shushed. The judge didn't object. Outside, the clip hit social media within minutes. #SocialVirus trended globally. Young people made it a badge of honor, a call to rise. A refusal to disappear. Inside, Drexler whispered to an aide. She's playing this like a symphony. But what he didn't understand was this. Jasmine wasn't playing. She was answering. The courtroom had settled into a tense rhythm. Hours of procedural wrangling, legal posturing, and oblique references to classified documents had frayed nerves on all sides. The press smelled a crescendo, and the public held its breath. William Drexler rose, adjusting his glasses with a practiced smirk. He began his argument with the kind of gravitas that made it clear he had prepared this speech for months. His voice was polished, authoritative. Your Honor, esteemed members of the committee, he intoned. The doctrine of digital national security is rooted in decades of precedent, from United States v. Nixon to Holder v. Humanitarian Law Project. It protects the executive branch's ability to act decisively in the face of threats, internal and external. Suppressing harmful speech, even online, falls squarely within this outer perimeter. He paced slowly, eyes sweeping the room. 2. Allow this inquiry to proceed would be to hamstring our nation's ability to defend itself in the digital age. The plaintiff's claims are nothing more than a political weaponization of the courts. The room was rapt. Drexler smiled, certain his closing line would finish the fight. Then Jasmine stood. No notes. No hesitation. The room leaned in. She began, voice steady and measured, every word deliberate. Mr. Drexler's argument rests on the premise that national security is a blanket excuse, a cloak to cover all executive actions, no matter how questionable. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. But the Constitution does not grant the President a license to silence the voices of citizens simply because they challenge his authority. She shifted slightly, gaze fixed on Drexler. Digital. National security is a concept still being defined, tested, and debated. It is not a carte blanche to subvert democracy. The courtroom was silent, she continued. Supreme Court. Rulings have made clear that even the president is not above the First Amendment. You cannot stretch the Constitution to fit your fears. Exactly 60 seconds had passed since she rose. Drexler blinked, stunned. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Then it happened. The courtroom erupted. Spontaneous applause, shouts of approval. Some gasped. Reporters frantically typed into their devices. The clip would be viral by noon. Even Judge Stanton's lips twitched upward in a nearly imperceptible smile. Jasmine's colleagues in the gallery exchanged looks of awe. In that moment, she was no longer just a congresswoman or a blogger. She was the voice that refused to be silenced, and the world was listening. Within hours of the courtroom eruption, the backlash came like a tidal wave. Right-wing media outlets churned out hit pieces faster than Jasmine's team could fact-check. Headlines screamed, "Radical blogger hijacks Congress." Crockett's witch hunt against Trump, political theater at its worst. Social media algorithms, once allies in her rise, now became battlegrounds for coordinated disinformation. Campaigns. Jasmine's phone didn't stop ringing. Callers, some supportive, others vicious, filled her voicemail with rage and threats. Reporters ambushed her outside her apartment. Activists flooded her inbox with offers of help and pleas for strength. But Jasmine refused to engage with the noise. Instead, she released a short, composed video that spread organically, watched by millions within hours, sitting in front of a simple bookshelf. She looked directly into the camera and said, "I'm not here for applause. I'm here for truth, for justice, and for every person who's ever been silenced simply for speaking their mind." Her voice was steady, resonant, and unyielding. The video wasn't a rant. It wasn't a rebuttal. It was a statement of purpose, and it resonated. Donations to her. Political action committees surged. Grassroots organizers rallied. Her platform became a beacon not only for the politically engaged, but for those who felt unseen and unheard. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, her legal team worked tirelessly. Late-night strategy sessions, data analysis, and preparations for the next court hearing filled every waking hour. William Drexler, watching from his marble office, scowled at the growing storm. He knew this wasn't just a fight over law. It was a battle for the narrative, for the soul of a generation. He muttered to an aide, "She's no ordinary opponent. This isn't going away." But Jasmine was ready, because she had learned early in life that true strength wasn't found in noise or fury. It was found in quiet, relentless conviction, and in that conviction she found power outside the courthouse. Protesters gathered, young and old, black and white, united not by politics but by the raw demand for accountability. The scene was no longer just a legal battle. It was a movement, and Jasmine Crockett was its reluctant, undeniable face. The leak came without warning, a confidential Department of Justice memo, stamped top secret, found its way into the hands of a tenacious investigative journalist. Within hours, the contents were splashed across every major news outlet, igniting a firestorm. Jasmine sat in her office, phone muted, eyes scanning the damning document. The memo detailed a series of internal discussions from early 2021. At its core, it revealed what was euphemistically called a legal containment strategy aimed squarely at voices like hers. The language was clinical, detached, yet chilling. In its implication, subject profiles have been identified as threats to national cohesion. Pre-indictment destabilization measures recommended. Outreach to allied media partners advised to soften public perception. Most haunting was a passage referencing Jasmine Crockett by name. She read aloud softly, the words burning through the silence. Maintain disinformation campaigns. Ensure persistent public doubt of credibility. Her assistant watched quietly as Jasmine folded the document, her face unreadable. "This is beyond politics," she said finally. "This is an attack on the very idea of dissent." In court, the memo became a pivotal piece of evidence. It was the first time a direct link was established between high-level officials and the systematic targeting of political opponents through clandestine operations. William Drexler challenged the document's authenticity with his usual bravado, calling it unauthorized leaks designed to poison the court. But Judge Stanton was unmoved. "This document will be entered into evidence," he ruled firmly. "The court recognizes the gravity of these claims." Outside, public opinion swelled. A rising chorus demanded transparency. Calls for hearings grew louder, not just from opposition lawmakers but from disillusioned conservatives uneasy with the overreach. Jasmine's message was clear. This isn't about politics anymore. It's about the survival of democracy itself. In the quiet moments before the next hearing, she gazed at the Capitol skyline, feeling the weight of history pressing down, but also the stirring hope that truth, once unearthed, could never be buried again. The morning air was thick with anticipation. The courthouse quarters buzzed like a hive disturbed. Everyone knew today would be pivotal. Jasmine arrived early, dressed in a charcoal suit that seemed to absorb the gravity of the moment. Her eyes scanned the room with quiet determination. Opposite her, William Drexler looked unusually tense, running a hand through his hair as if the usual confidence was slipping. The hearing began swiftly. Drexler took the floor first, launching into a forceful defense of the administration's actions. He cited classified intelligence, national security imperatives, and executive prerogative, weaving a narrative of necessity and protection. But Jasmine was ready. When her turn came, she rose steadily, voice calm but charged with purpose. "Mr. Drexler," she began, locking eyes with him, "your argument hinges on the assumption that the ends justify the means. But the Constitution does not permit a government that operates in shadows, silencing those it deems inconvenient. She paced slowly before the bench. Tell me, at what point does national security become a euphemism for tyranny? When does protecting the state mean destroying its soul? Drexler's jaw clenched. You argue that these measures were necessary to protect what? Power? Image? Or fear? The courtroom held its breath. She reached into her binder, pulling out a previously unseen affidavit. This document, she said, is from a former White House assistant who witnessed meetings where digital cleansing was discussed openly without concern for legality or ethics. A murmur spread. Your client's team called it maintenance of narrative control, a euphemism for silencing dissent. Drexler struggled to maintain composure. Objection. This is hearsay. Jasmine's reply was sharp. This is testimony from someone under oath who risks everything to reveal the truth. Judge Stanton eyed Drexler sharply. Counsel, I remind you that attempts to discredit witness credibility must be backed by evidence. Drexler's facade cracked for the first time. Jasmine pressed on. Truth is not partisan, it's a beacon, and no cloak of secrecy can extinguish its light. Her words reverberated, stirring a mixture of hope and fury in the gallery. Outside the courtroom, reporters scrambled to capture every moment. Social media lit up with clips of the exchange. Crockett dismantles Drexler, trended within minutes. In the charged atmosphere. One thing was clear, the battle for truth was far from over, but Jasmine had just delivered a blow no one would forget.